Hi, and welcome to another Scientology Outside of the Church podcast. This is season 11, episode 1. This is going to be a solo podcast with just me, uh, second only to some of the others that we had last year. And I'm going to go over the Ideal Org data series policy letter as it, shall we say, in comparison to what you see in the corporate church of the Church of Scientology. For years, they've been pushing this ideal org plan, which is based off of Data Series 40. This is HCO Policy Letter 12 March 1975, Issue 2, and is part of the Data Series policy letter, some of LRH's best, absolute best, and almost like an administrative OT level for finding the situation in an organization, a business, uh, your first dynamic. It can be applied to anything. And this series of policy letters, I cannot recommend enough to anyone. Of course, the data evaluators course is an absolute gem. And what's been going on with Corporate Church of Scientology is they alterred what the original plan was back in the 80s. They used to have an LRH birthday game where all of the orgs would play a game and they would get so many points based off of statistics. And this is something that LRH set up. And the org that got the most points in a particular region on the planet over the year would then have the universe board come in and audit that staff up to OT. Now, how many times that happened, I really don't know. I know that there were some orgs that won the birthday game for many years, and then the whole thing was just dropped out, and David Miscavige replaced it with the ideal org. Now, it's important to take into consideration that in the data series, you have these things called outpoints and plus points. I'm going to go over these real quick with you, both outpoints and plus points. A plus point is a datum of truth when found to be true compared to the 5 points. The following is a list of plus points which are used in evaluation. Needless to say, plus points are very important in evaluation as they show where logic exists and where things are going right or likely to. And these are the plus points. You've got related facts known, all relevant facts known, events in correct sequence, events in actual sequence, time noted, time is properly noted. The data proven factual, the data must be factual, which is to say true and valid. Correct relative importance, the important and unimportant are correctly sorted out. Expected time period, events occurring are done in the time one would reasonably expect them to be. Adequate data, no sectors of omitted data that would influence the situation. Applicable data, the data presented or available applies to the matter in hand and not something else. Correct source, not a wrong source. This is a very important one when it comes to the church. LRH is the correct source, not something since then. Data in same classification. Data from 2 or more different classes of material not introduced as the same class. Identities are identical, not similar or different. Similarities are similar, not identical or different. Differences are different, not made to be identical or similar. Now, those are the plus points. An outpoint is any one of the datums that is offered as true that is in fact found to be illogical when compared to the 5 primary points of illogic. Now, the outpoints are as follows. Omit a fact, change sequence of events, drop out time, add a falsehood, alter importance. Okay, now these outpoints, it's easy, it's easy to find fault with anything if you want to. And the outpoints and the plus points aren't the end all of end alls when it comes to the data series. But this is how you find out the departure from an ideal scene. So you have to ask yourself, what would be the ideal scene of a independent Church of Scientology? What would be the ideal scene of the corporate Church of Scientology? Now, keep this in mind as we go over this data series policy letter, the one called the ideal org. Now, the irony of this is called the ideal org. Okay, this is what LRH set out as the ideal org. Many of you may not have ever stepped foot in a corporate Church of Scientology. Maybe half, or a little bit better of our listeners have stepped foot in the corporate Church of Scientology. Most of our public comes from the corporate Church of Scientology. They've had enough. They know the tech works, but they don't like what's going on with the high pressure sales, the way they're treated, so on and so forth. So that's the whole idea of this podcast, is to give you a compare and contrast of what LRH said and what you see the corporate Church of Scientology doing currently. And that's the thing, is you're looking at a severe modification and alteration when you compare them to the outpoints and the plus points in the data series. This is funny because the church publishes this, and they may have altered it. I haven't seen the most recent iteration of it in the management series, which is where the data series series of policy letters are. However, we have the correct and accurate ideal org HCO PL. So we're going to go over these. Keep in mind the out points and the plus points, because you're looking for a departure from the ideal scene. When you look at the out points and plus points and you gather the data and you look at the statistics, because when you look at the statistics, that's where you find the truth. If the statistics aren't there, the hardest thing to spot is a missing. And this is something LRH says on the OT levels. It's non-confidential, so don't worry. But this is the thing, is you don't know what the real statistics are, because LRH talks about what a reliable source is. Okay, and a reliable source is important, because if you don't have a reliable source, you don't know what the data really is. So you have to take that into consideration as well when we go over this, because we only have so much information. And like LRH says, look, don't listen. So we have to take that in mind, because we don't have access to the real stats. All we know is what we see that is going on planetarily with the orgs and what is really happening. Those of you that have been into the orgs know what you see. So I'm going to go over this, and we're going to have a little bit of a chat about this. And this podcast it leans towards people who may not have ever heard about this, the ideal org policy letter, and those who've never been in the church probably won't have as much reality with it. But it's very important. And if you hear these points, you're going to go, okay, these are the out points and the plus points of the whole thing. So I'm going to get started on this. Again, Data Series 40, the ideal org. This came out in 1975. Okay, quite a long time ago. And orgs were very, very, very different then than they are now. LRH says the ideal org would be an activity where people came to achieve freedom and where they had confidence they would attain. Now, if you looked at the current orgs that are extant on the planet, the ideal org would be an activity where people came to achieve freedom and where they had confidence they would attain. Like I said, most of the people that come to us have left the church because they don't have confidence that they would attain it, especially from the viewpoint of finances and money and how much it costs to go up the bridge these days. Back in the 70s, LRH had a policy that stated that it shouldn't be any more than 10% of what a person earned in a year. And so that's important. the confidence they would attain it. Do people really get up the bridge? Can they get up the bridge when it's $300,000, $400,000 to go OT, sometimes more? It goes on to say it would have enough space in which to train, process, and administrate without crowd. Well, they've purchased all of these buildings that they have, and these buildings are purchased with the funds from donations from people who are very successful in life, and then they charge rent to the organization locally to be there. That's an outpoint. That's an outpoint. If the building's paid for, why in the world would you charge rent to the organization that is there? That's pretty nefarious when you look at it, because that money comes out of the account before staff get paid. Think about that. So these people have to work very, very, very hard and get paid very little, because there isn't anybody in these organizations except for the largest organizations, and still then they don't get paid very well in the units that they are given for their particular post. So take that into consideration, that these people are trying so hard, and they're decent people. They're just misguided. They don't know what's going on, what's really happening. We'll get into that more here in a bit. But the point is it would have enough space in which to train, process, and administrate without crowd. Yep, they've done that. That's a plus point. But they've done it where people are donating the money for the building. And LRH says that the org should buy the building themselves. Okay, so the org is not buying the building themselves. They're getting donations. And we don't know how much money is actually being given towards a particular building and how much of that money is being kept. We have no way of knowing that. And a prime example of that is the now somewhat new building in Clearwater, Florida, where you have this huge multi-story, one block in size building that they sat on the property for years and years and years and years and pulled in millions upon millions upon millions of dollars. They also paid a lot of fines to the city of Clearwater because they took too long to finish it. But it's one of the biggest cash cows that they could ever have. And we'll never know how much money they actually made off of that building, but it probably paid for itself multiple times before they ever got finished. This is how David Miscavige operates. So most of these new organizations have that. The other thing to say is that in some cases, they buy the building and then they lease out some of the space to other businesses. So what you're looking at is you're looking at a real estate acquisition firm that buys buildings with other people's money, charges the org rent. These people should be getting that money in their pay, but they're not, because they're having to pay rent to the Corporate Church of Scientology, which got the building from other funds, instead of the org building it or acquiring it themselves, because it's so hard for them to acquire anything because of, well, what we'll get to here in a little bit in the rest of this. LRH goes on to say it would be located where the public could identify and find it. They can find the orgs. Used to be that the orgs needed to be someplace where there was a lot of foot traffic. Well, that's a bit of an antiquated idea from the viewpoint of the 1950s when he said that, because places where there's foot traffic, typically you don't want to be in the U.S. and modern United States. It's different in Europe and other places in the world possibly, but they can find it on Google and everything, so that's fine. He goes on to say it would be busy looking with staff in motion, not standing about. Most of these ideal orgs are, and the joke is that they're called the ideal morgues because there's nobody in them. Now we'll get to that in a little bit as to why. And these people are trying really, really hard to take whatever people that come in and help them. But we're looking at, the cost and the high pressure and everything like that. It says it would be clean and attractive enough not to repel its public. Well, they've got that one down for sure. When it came to COVID, there was some insanity along with that they had to clean the walls every day with disinfectant and all of this stuff. But, let's go along with that and let's say that it's clean. He says the org board would be up to date and where the public could see who and what was where and which the staff would use for routing and action. Okay, they probably got that from what we've seen. And that's good, and it can be organized. But the thing is you're looking at an organization that is run by someone, David Miscavige, who micromanages everything. So the org board is there, but the org board's not there, and everything is run by one guy who dictates everything. And that's a problem because there should be an organizing board there, but this is what come down to, and it's really unfortunate. He says a heavy outflow of letters and mailings would be pouring out. Well, they do definitely do that. They spend a ridiculous amount of money on letter writing and magazines and all that stuff to people every day. So that's happening. But we'll get to that later as to how that's not helpful. Answers would be pouring in. Answers are not pouring in. The orgs are empty. Across the planet, Scientology, the Corporate Church of Scientology, is the fastest shrinking religion on the planet, statistically. Auditors would be auditing in Division 4, Hubbard Guidance Center, which is where all the auditing takes place. And Qual would be rather empty because the auditors know what they're doing and all of that. Now, this is a big thing because with all of the changes to the tech, part of the reason why the orgs are empty is because they're not delivering the standard tech anymore. With the 3 swings floating needle that overruns people, the survival rundown, that is not an LRH rundown, and all of the alterations to the tech, including the golden age of tech, part 1 and part 2. These things were never developed by LRH. It's gone so far that the orgs are empty because they're not delivering what LRH said they should be delivering. So when people aren't getting what LRH developed and done the way he said that it should be done, you're going to have an empty org. This is an output. Supervisors would be training students interestedly in two-way communicating, all slow. Okay, that's all good and fine. But when you don't have anybody in there, you don't have anybody getting trained. And only the biggest of orgs have people in there. Now, it's important to note that the church has deleted the Class 8 course and the Class 6 St. Hill Special Briefing course from the advanced orgs and St. Hills. They don't deliver these anymore. They've also removed the technical volumes, which is just amazing. They've deleted them. So you have to take their word for it on things, and only the top people have that information anymore. So you can't even go to that information. So how do the supervisors train students interestedly if they can't give them the proper information? The Hubbard Communications Office area secretary would have hats for everyone and checked out on everyone. I'm sure that they have that. But again, you're looking at the altered information from what LRH said, and then you have the dictates and the constant micromanaging by David Miscavige. So that's an outpoint as well, because they're not doing what LRH said that should be done. There would be a pool of people in training to take over new admin and tech posts. There aren't. That's another thing, is because they really micromanage the auditors, and there aren't that many people going into auditor training. If you go down to Flag in Clearwater, Florida, there's nothing happening. It's a ghost town. And that's where people are supposed to get trained as auditors and as for supervisors and on posts and everything, because things have been altered. The staff would be well paid because they were productive. Okay, huge outpoint here. Okay, the staff is not well paid. They never have been. And that's the thing. They can't get well paid because things have been altered, because there's nobody in the org and they're not delivering what LRH said to do. The money goes towards these ideal orgs and paying rent, an exorbitant amount of rent, to upper management, David Miscavige. So he's making money off of free real estate and then leasing out other parts of the building that they can't use because there's nobody in there to fill the org up. Huge outpoint. And if people were well paid, they would work better and they would be rewarded for their being an up statistic because everything would be plugging right along and would be great. The public divisions would be buzzing with effective action and new people and furnishing a torrent of new names to Central Plot. Not happening. Part of this is because Scientology, the Corporate Church of Scientology, has due to David Miscavige's mismanagement and probably mismanagement on purpose, they have an incredibly bad repute with the public in the media and everything over the last 30, 35 years. So buzzing with effective action, this isn't happening. There's no buzzing because things have been so altered. And this is why we exist as AOGP in the independent field, is because things have been changed and there's nobody out there that's delivering the real thing. People get a taste of it and they want the real thing, but they can't get it, so they come to us instead of going to the church and being high pressured and push. So the public divisions aren't buzzing. That's an output. The pre-clears would be getting full grades to ability attained for each, not 8 minutes from 0 to 4, but more like 30 processes, and they would be leaving with high praises. Okay, so here's an outpoint. Instead, we have on the expanded grades, in some cases, 50, 60, 70 processes or more that are being run to overrun due to, well, let's say the survival rundown, where people are so overrun on it that they die. That's overrun of magnitude. And they're not leaving with high praises in most cases because they're overrun all the time on things. And this is, if you have to correct somebody, you have to charge them for that correction in the Corporate Church of Scientology, which means more money because they're overrun. You have to fix the problem with the auditing that you created. Huge outpoint. So this is a problem, is that they've added so many processes to get somebody through something that they have to charge them more money, more time, more repair. Huge outpoint. The students would be graduating, he says, the students would be graduating all on fire to audit. Where's the auditing happen? Where's it happen? Students would be graduating all on fire to audit. This is another outpoint. This is nobody in there. Okay? One could look at this ideal org and know that this was the place a new civilization was being established to this planet. Okay, you have all these fancy orgs with all this fancy furniture, all these fancy displays and computers showing videos and all this stuff. One could look at this ideal org and know that this was a place a new civilization was being established for this planet. That's not happening. Okay? That's an outpoint. Okay? And that outpoint is probably the most glaring outpoint with the fastest shrinking religion on the planet. And you have to ask yourself, why? It's because all of these things add up to pushing people away. He says the thousands or more actions that made it up would dovetail smoothly one with another. And the public relations area control would be such that no one would dream of threatening. Okay, let me say that again. The public relations area control would be such that no one would dream of threatening it. Okay, the opposite of that is occurring. If you go on YouTube, if you do a Google search, you will see some of the worst public relations area control ever. Ever. And this is because the mismanagement is so gross on the subject. LRH would be furious about all of the materials being put on the internet because it was put in a court case and made available to anyone. He didn't set up anything tech-wise to control handle, repair all of this data being put on the internet. That's where everything started, roughly in about 1990. Is all of the data, the entire grade chart, all of the auditing data was put into a court case and made part of the public record. Now that benefits the independent field, but it also creates billions of bypass cases where people are seeing confidential materials before they're ready for it. And let me tell you, it's probably 95% of the people have looked at the upper level materials before they should have, because they're freely available. And we've done podcasts on this. And you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't do that. I implore you not to do that. It takes a lot of work to handle somebody who has looked at these materials because they weren't ready for it. That is probably the biggest issue with why the church is failing, is because they let LRH down on this. And they have no way to control it. So they tell their parishioners, don't go on the internet. Don't look at the internet. If you look at the internet, you're going to go into ethics, and we might have to expel you, or you can't do anything else because you can't look. You can't look at this information. Okay, that's fine. But you put it out there. You let it out there. And when's the last time you've seen the church do a condition with their public? And this is why the ideal orgs are dead. Dead. Because they let the planet down. Miscavige let the planet down and never handled this. There's nothing he can do. The cat's out of the bag. So he's almost destroyed the subject single-handedly by his own bumbling of things, because his PR area control is not such that no one would dream of threatening it. All of the mishandlings, all of the miscommunications, people who have died, lawsuits, constant lawsuits. And this isn't the subject of Scientology. This is the Corporate Church of Scientology that is having this, causing this, because they're not following LRH's policies on this. They've drifted so far away through alteration, through changing things, to make it a dangerous subject to anybody that hears about it, sees it in the media. Now, there's other reasons for that, because the powers that be want to see Scientology fail. And I think that David Miscavige is part of that. And he's doing the best he can to milk it for everything's worth while he's still alive, and line his pockets, as well as the attorneys at the top, none of which are Scientologists, who own all of these copyrights and stole them away from LRH to the organization that should have owned them. Corporate Church of Scientology has been bought, sold, and paid for, and is no longer a representation of what LRH wanted it to be. LRH goes on and says, such an ideal org would be built by taking what one has and step by step building and smoothing, grooving in, and handling each of its functions, with each of its divisions doing more and more of its job, more and more of its full job better and better. Okay, they can't do that because they're not following policy. And the reason why LRH took so much time to write this policy is it was successful actions that were found to work based off of prior errors. That's how you develop policy, and or with successes. And this is something that the church doesn't do, because they're not representing what LRH said in policy. It goes on to say the business is always there. The skill with which it is handled and the results on PCs and students is the single important line which makes it possible to build the rest. This is not happening, because it is not an ideal org. Isn't a building with fancy furniture and big bright signs and all of that. Now, it shouldn't look like a dump either. But that's the accent is on the physical universe, on the material universe, matter, energy, space, and time. It's not focused on theta. Okay? That's what Scientology is about. It isn't about the money. It isn't about how opulent it is. And, that's the thing. is the accent should be on freeing beings. It should not be on how glitzy it looks and everything. It's almost like, if you went to Italy and you went into the churches and how opulent they are and all of this, and you're just like, wow. Yeah, I mean, there needs to be a balance of it should be clean, but it should be getting products, and that's what's not happening. There is no production happening because of the mishandling, and people are unhappy about this. And that's the problem, is it's not about the things, it's about the beings and about that they're getting the results that Elrich intended. He says the ideal org is the image one builds toward. Image one builds toward. All of these things need to be positive. The ideal scene is people getting up the bridge, being and becoming freed beings, and having abilities and awareness and capability in helping their fellow man. Okay. And that's not happening, unfortunately. He says it is the product of the causative actions of many. Anything which is short of an ideal org is an outpoint that can be put right. The end product is not just an ideal org, but a new civilization already on its way. So that pretty much sums it up. We don't have a cleared planet. We have the fastest shrinking religion on the planet due to out public relations, staff not being paid well, being miserable, having to sleep eight to a 2-bedroom house because they don't make enough money. They're not winning. And this is another thing that's not mentioned in here, is that the staff isn't getting any better themselves. They're being hatted on their posts with incorrect materials, altered importance, all of these things, but they're not making it themselves up the bridge. And the reason they're not making it themselves up the bridge is they're not allowed to, because they have to put so much time into earning somebody else the primary money that is coming in from the organization. And they should be shining examples of this. Most of the people that get on staff and are shining examples have a wealthy uh, husband or wife to support them so that they can continue on being on staff. That's the only time you ever see that, and that's been my experience as well. Is because if you're not getting it yourself, how can you help other people? But that's where the accent is, and that's an outpoint of magnitude itself. Is that the staff should be winning, they should be well paid, they should be getting up the bridge themselves, and when they leave, and if they can't make it, they're slapped with a freeloader's debt that they have to pay before they can do anything else. Now that's LRH policy, because you've got a 5-year contract that you have to sign in order to go for training. And then you have to fulfill that contract after you get your training. So in some cases, you might be in training for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years. Yes, 7 years. And then come back and fulfill another 5-year contract. And in many cases, and I know of one particular individual who got trained for 7 years, went and fulfilled his contract, and then was expelled and declared because he wouldn't sign another contract because he was so highly trained. That's an output. So you have to take a look at this, and you have to look at what is the departure from the ideal scene of what LRH is saying here. And look at these orgs. Look, don't listen. Are they booming? Are people winning? Is the parking lot full? Are people coming out with big smiles on their faces? Are they shining examples of what Scientology should be? That type of thing. And I'm not attacking the subject of Scientology. I'm not even attacking the Corporate Church of Scientology. What I'm doing is I'm trying to appeal to our listeners to go look for themselves and look, don't listen. This is what LRH said. Look, don't listen. What do you see? Use the hypnosis HCOP and look at what you see. Don't have any preconceived notions about it. Look around. Look around and see what you see going on. You should see a bustling org. You should see people moving in and out very quickly, getting up the bridge, winning, helping other people, not paying the IAS a ridiculous amount of money because Scientology is going to end tomorrow if you don't give us $3,000 to $5,000, or in some cases, hundreds of thousands of dollars. It is important to note that the IAS is not part of the Corporate Church of Scientology, and it is a separate entity. There was no such thing as the IAS once upon a time. There used to be the HAZI, and that was $5 a year to be part of that. Now, granted, you could say $25 or $100 now due to inflation, where you could be part of that third dynamic group, and that would be fine. But thousands of dollars is ridiculous to give to an organization that's not part of the Corporate Church of Scientology. All of these things are tacked on. And this is part of the ideal org image itself too, is you have all of these books, all of these lectures, all of this stuff that's in the bookstores and everything has been altered because they can't keep the copyrights on them, but for a certain period of time, and then they have to alter them again. And this has happened many, many times. It's like a game of telephone, but in print and in the lecture. The books have been altered. The lectures have been deleted in many places, and things have been taken out, and you wouldn't know because, again, the hardest thing to spot is a missingness. And when the hardest thing to spot is a missingness, you're getting something else. It's a lie. It's an alter is. Okay? And for anything to persist, there has to be a lie behind it. Now, that's a broad statement, but it's part of the Scientology Axiom. But you have to take this into account and look at this situation and go, okay, here's all this fancy stuff, all these glitzy lecture packs and course packs and everything, but it's not what LRH actually said. There's all these differences. People have been omitted, concepts have been omitted, anything that might put your attention and get you to look at something the way that it truly is that LRH said isn't in there anymore. Why would they do that? But you wouldn't know unless you knew what was in there originally. So the culmination of this podcast is look, don't listen. Take what I've told you here. Get yourself a copy of the original Ideal Org HCO PL. You can get it on our website. You can go in and you can talk to Finn, our AI, on ao-gp.org. And you can ask it to give you the information, or you can sign up to collegeofindependent-scientology.com, and you can go in and you can download a free copy of what I've just read to you in the data series folder in our other AI on the Oracle, and you can read this and you can see this for yourself. You don't have to slug out 20, 30 years and hundreds of thousands of dollars to get up the bridge and get the real thing. That's another part of this ideal org thing, is the fancier you make it look, the more they can charge you for it. And it doesn't have to take decades to go clear an OT. You just need to have the proper information to look at what LRH said and what they're doing. Look, don't listen. I hope this has been helpful, and it's not terribly long, but it's to the point that you really need to understand that what's going on with the Corporate Church of Scientology is not what LRH intended. I can't convince you of that myself, but I can tell you what LRH said. And that's what I'm trying to do here with this podcast, is get you to get interested and go, he said what? And once you're able to do that, and you see what he said and what his intentions were, then you can go take a look and go, okay, now I get it. I get it. So I hope this is helpful. And I really want you to go free. I want you to get what LRH intended, whether it's with us or some other independent organization. But I felt duty bound to give this to you and let you know that the ideal org in LRH's mind and the ideal org in David Miscavige's mind are two totally and entirely different things. They are not the same thing. And this is why you see so much bad press and bad media with the Corporate Church of Scientology, is they're not delivering what's promised. That's a policy of LRH. They're delivering something else, and you didn't even know it right before your eyes. So take a look. Go to the College of Independent Scientology.com. Grab this reference off of the Oracle once you're in the college and registered, and read this and compare it and get up the bridge a lot faster. That's all we want. Take care. Namaste, and we love.